Welcome to Stories of Matt Toon, the podcast where the quiet roads and corn-lined horizons of central Illinois come to life. Here, in this small town, shaped by hard work, faded storefronts, and generations of family roots, history isn't something in a textbook. It's something people still live every day. In each episode, we sit down with local historians, lifelong residents, and Toonies whose lives have been shaped by Matt Toon's past and present. These are the stories that built the town, told by the people who keep them alive today. So, pull up a chair and join us in talking about anything and everything Matt Toon.
Yeah. Come on in, Tom. Play it so pretty.
Yeah.
I like that. Hey, everybody. This is your friends and fellow Toonies, Jordan and Tom, recording our episode of Toonie Loons, the podcast that brings the voices of Matt Toon straight to you. From local legends to everyday stories, we're here to share the moments, memories, and characters that make this town unforgettable. Welcome back, everybody, for episode 2 of the Cox family story. Tom, after we spoke with Tim, what are your feelings?
I think the conversation went great. We got more of it coming on this episode. It was just so much information that I didn't know if he'd be comfortable or uncomfortable talking about. And it made me kind of think about how I grew up in Mattoon, graduated from Mattoon. I remember hearing about it, but it was almost just like a faded, documentation. Whereas now that I've done a little research and I find out how many people I grew up with, their parents were so deeply touched by this. I mean, this was a huge experience in Mattoon for that moment, from every angle, from being a child to being an adult to being a police officer, the emergency services. Mattoon had never seen anything like this. And honestly, neither had the Midwest in general. I mean, this was a new era that was coming into America.
Yes, and I just spoke with a relative last night, and even though she was not born at the time, but she's in the family, and she feels like she was there just vicariously through the family and through all the stories that are told, and her being at the parole board hearings and things like that. It just like she's right back there whenever it comes to mind, and so kind of felt.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of Toonies in general that are probably they've lived with this their whole life. That's why there's still the interest in it. But just doing the research that we've done, which frankly I think we've gotten deeper into it than we thought we would have to, just to do a due diligence. But I can't believe, how many people I knew that were so closely related to this situation. Even like all my Humboldt friends, all of their parents were close with the family and close in proximity. And a lot of my friends that grew up on North 33rd and that part of Mattoon, I still call it the Rural King side of Mattoon. It's just such an era of time in American history. Like we had mentioned, Martin Luther King had just been assassinated, and then a couple weeks after this, Bobby Kennedy is assassinated. And then really, the whole Summer of Love, which was a huge changing point and transition in American history, was coming about. So there was this huge change that was going from coast to coast in America at the time. And Mattoon literally became part of that epicenter with this tragedy, because things like this hadn't happened. There was the murders up in Chicago that happened. But really, besides that, the state had never seen a mass murder like this.
Yeah, the reverberations have echoed out over the years, and they still do.
There's people that are definitely still living with this, and it's been 58 years.
Yes. And so on this episode, we're going to be speaking with Judge Glenn, whose father was the prosecutor back in 1968 and was a proponent of Charles Fuller getting the death penalty. And we'll talk about the case with him. And then later on, we'll speak with Carlissa Pucket, who some of the kids went and lived with her family, with Aunt Pauline, and we'll be speaking with her. And after that, we're going to finish up with the second part of Tim Cox's interview and get a little bit more information from him. And there will be a third part as well. That we're still getting some interviews and tying up some loose ends as far as doing our due diligence. And so, again, if anyone has a story or any take on this, please email or message Tom or I, and we'll see if we can fit your story into this.
Well, let's start off with the judge stuff, because I have some legal questions that come to mind with this case that I think would be best answered by him. And I think that's a great way to start this episode.
So, here we go. This is Judge Glenn here, and we're glad that he could join us. We've got Judge Glenn with us, whose father was the 1968 prosecutor in the Fuller case with the Cox murders. And so thanks for being with us, Judge. Before we get into the legal side of things, how would you describe your connection, to the case? I know that you were only 8 at the time. And I know that your father, might have not talked a lot about it, but what did you know from his point of view, maybe?
Okay, sure. And I thank you for inviting me. And I'm a retired judge. I retired in 2022. Mm-hmm. But I am familiar with the matter. But I was aware that it happened. As indicated, I was 8 years old at the time, and my dad didn't speak about it. But I was aware that 5 children were murdered. My mom would have talked about it. We had a babysitter who was also a bailiff at the courthouse in Coles County, and she would speak about it. And I probably heard about it from some other people. I never really heard about it from my dad until the sentencing. I think he intentionally tried not to talk about it while the case was pending. And from what I understand, I think that caused a little bit of controversy with the press, because the press, some of the hearings I understand were closed, and the press had an issue with not being at those hearings.
Oh, I'm sure they probably did. It's, wow, I can't imagine the weight on Dad. This was had to be one of his toughest cases. I imagine. I remember your dad coming in, through the funeral home, and you and Dad usually together, and he was just always so nice to me, and I always look forward to see him, whether it was there or at Glen and Logue, going in to talk with Tom there. Or, anyways, so what kind of prosecutor was your dad in the late 60s there? How would you describe him as a prosecutor?
Well, from what I understand, he was an excellent prosecutor. I practiced law with him for 13 years, and then I became a judge. So I ran into a lot of people who knew him and who had practiced with him, bailiffs who served with him, Sheriff Mike Curtis, who worked with him, and several of those individuals indicated what a great state's attorney he was. Some said he was the greatest that in their lifetimes. And having worked with him myself for 13 years, I saw his courtroom demeanor. I saw how prepared he was. He was always wanting to do right by his clients, worked hard, and usually achieved a successful result. So seeing what a good attorney he was, I believe the other individuals who said he was a good prosecutor. There were issues during my childhood where we had to have a bodyguard protect us children because gangs were wanting to assassinate my dad. They firebombed his car when he and my mother were eating at the Holiday Inn one day. It was the Edwards gang. And somebody came in saying somebody's car's on fire, and it was Dad's car. And that necessitated a bodyguard. So we had Vernon Branson, a former Mattoon police chief, grandfather of Jeff Branson, who was also a Mattoon police chief. He sat in front of our house in his car during the day, times when my dad was at work. He would drive me to kindergarten, and that's how life was. And I would expect it's that way because he was such a good prosecutor that people were after him.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, if he wasn't hitting the mark, then they surely wouldn't be worried about your dad there. So, in this case landed on his desk in April of 1968, 5 children, 5 counts, and confession, the next day. And, even though he didn't talk about it, I just can't imagine, how he was feeling. And, this had to be one of his toughest cases, don't you think?
It probably was. It was, I'm sure, his most important case, and yes, it was tough emotionally. Wow. Not so much from the legal wise, because I believe there was an admission and a guilty plea, so probably wasn't that tough to try or to go to court on. But as far as the emotional toll it takes, yes, it would be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You were 8 years old, and again, without having, besides through your dad, the connection, but later on in life, with the town and kind of getting to know it more. Can you kind of speak on that?
Right. I did hear from him. I did hear him talk about it a little bit after the sentencing. And then as I grew up through school, I probably heard kids in grade school talk about it. I don't remember it specifically, though. Once I got to high school, though, having been in public schools, I didn't know a lot of the kids that went to St. Mary's, the Catholic school in Mattoon, but I met several of them in high school, and they were classmates of some of the Cox children. 3 of the victims, one was 7, one was 8, and one was 9. And my classmates, we were 8. So they knew some of those children, and they would bring it up. When I was in college, the book, The Mattoon Murders, came out in 1982. That sparked some discussion when I was in college. And then in my adult life, as my oldest daughter, about 20 years ago, had a school project where they had to give audio-visual reports. And her friend did her report on the Cox murders, and my daughter accompanied her to the farmhouse in the area where the murders occurred, and they took a video with the description of what had happened, and I viewed that video. Yeah. And then when parole hearings came out, I would hear about it. Yeah,
on the Dole Road, actually, beyond 33rd, but yeah, just beyond there. So, and no, for someone who didn't grow up there, what did this mean to Mattoon? Again, you were young. Did you later on, maybe in as being a lawyer, and you said that you're connected in the sense that did you tell me that you've recently signed the petition?
Right. I'm aware that there's a parole hearing coming up, and there's a drive going on to sign petitions to object to the parole, granting of parole, and one of my sisters and I signed that petition.
Wow. Oh, there's been
my other siblings are out of town, and I don't think they know about it. But my sister and I signed it.
Yeah, is that Sharon?
Yes.
Yeah.
And my dad, whenever they came up, he wrote letters objecting to it. I mean, that was his mission, not to let Fuller ever get out of prison. So he always objected to it.
Wow. Yeah, from talking with Tim, there was, and you'll hear that with part of Tim's interview, is that there were these 12 consecutive years where the family actually wasn't, he was up on a yearly basis, and he was, they weren't even notified to even know that they had to go down and, go against him. And so maybe now, I think nowadays it had been on the every 5 year he'd be eligible, but the last time, I think at the last hearing, it was actually close. It was like an 8-6, and so people, the family needs the support more than anything right now. I don't know how things changed from the early 60s or late 60s till now as far as the parole for hearing goes. Do you know anything about that?
Sure. And one thing I will say, I don't think the Cox family has been treated very well over the years for reasons that you said. They weren't always brought up to speed or told about some of these hearings. There's more of an emphasis in the state of Illinois to protect the victims, and they have more rights now.
Yeah.
And I think there's a greater effort to help victims at this time. But I'm trying to remember what your question just was.
Oh, just maybe how the Illinois parole board review has changed. Yeah.
Yes. At that time, there were indeterminate sentences, and it would be like what we had here, 70 to 99 years, and you'd have those parole hearings by parole board, and those could get political, and that was abandoned and done away with in 1978, I believe. Mm-hmm. I started going to law school in 1982, and I started practicing in 1985, so I never had to deal with that.
Yeah.
But now it's natural life imprisonment, and under this situation, the statute would apply where if someone is found guilty of murdering more than one victim, if that defendant had attained the age of 18 at the time of the commission of the offense of the murder, it's natural life in prison. The death penalty used to be on the table, but effective July 1st, 2011, it was abolished. So it would automatically be natural life in prison at this time.
Wow. And of course, everyone was was calling for it, and just an unfathomable crime. Now, he, according to, Tim Cox was, shot up with sodium pentothal, which they no longer do, true serum, and but also was possibility of schizophrenia. They were kind of going back and forth with different, and I don't know about, like, say, if he was entertaining an insanity plea, but the fact that he changed his plea to guilty was what changed the whole trajectory in this case. Am I right?
Yes. And I'm not sure how often there were mental health hearings at that time, but I'm pretty confident that if a situation such as this arises at this time, there would be the defense attorneys would certainly look into the mental health of the individual and go that route.
Yeah.
Insanity or something of that nature.
Yeah. So Looking back at your father's work and, your own career, what do you think this case teaches about the justice system and what it can do and, what it can never fully fix?
Well, the American justice system is the best in the world. I haven't seen anything that's better. It's not perfect, but as good as it is, it cannot always make the victims whole. You might get a case where somebody's a victim of a robbery or theft, and perhaps the justice system is able to get restitution and have that person paid back. I mean, they'd still have the emotional scars about what happened, but they could be made whole financially. But in a murder, and then multiply that by 5, the victims are never made whole. And they feel some justification that it might be some consolation to them that the person is put away, but it doesn't get the victims back. They're gone. And if it had been a death penalty, at least the perpetrator would never be back. And so it's tough. And that's just something that I don't think can be cured. On a murder, you're never going to be made whole.
Yeah, closure is, it's not, with people watching, true crime now, then it's, you almost see more cases than, back in this day. And we, again, we're talking about just, 1968 back then in Mattoon versus say now. And, but the closure aspect is not there a lot of times in the for the families, and I just I know that again, going back to your dad and my grandpa and dad, and whether it was a family that your dad had that was a murder, or I'm sure he dealt with several murders, and he, they wouldn't take it home with them sometimes, but there was still kind of a weight there, wasn't there? Just
right, and it only makes sense because when you're prosecuting a murder crime, that's most egregious offense, I believe. I think most people would agree that could be committed. You're not only there to try to help the victims, but the public in general, for their safety, and also with the publicity that surrounds it. It's all on your shoulders, for the family, for the people of the state of Illinois and in the area. You have to get that person convicted and off the streets. So it is a big burden for a prosecutor.
Wow. Well, the Cox family has participated in this podcast, some of them so far, and listened to it. Is there anything that you'd want them to hear from you?
Yeah, what I would say to them, and I don't think I've met any of them personally, the murders of the 5 Cox children, that is the worst tragedy in the history of Coles County. Not seen or heard of anything that compares to it. My sympathies go out to all of the survivors, and I don't know how they've been able to cope with it all these years, especially with the murders themselves. That speaks for itself. But then the court hearings and the parole hearings and the fear that this man would be let out of prison, I just don't know how they've been able to cope. So my sympathies are with them, and I hope he does not get out.
Yeah. Well, and, Tim's going to guide us all as to, I know you've already signed, but he's going to lay it out for us. And we'll also be posting how you as a listener can make a difference in this case. As we said, or as I said earlier, I believe the last parole hearing was, 8-6, and he was still in, but that's pretty close. It was closer than the family was very very shocked by that. And so hopefully we can make a difference here. And as we continue to go through the story with the Cox family and with other nieces and nephews and everyone else that has a family story, or even the public, it's almost that Kennedy sort of, where were you when the Cox families were murdered? Where were you when you heard about it? It's just been that monumental and that huge of a case. It just it breaks our heart for the family, and so we're going to again treat the story with as much as respect as we can. And Judge, is it okay if we have you back on to answer any follow-up questions in the third episode? Would that be okay with you?
Sure. Yeah, if that's necessary, I would be privileged to be back.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Goodbye.
All right. Bye now.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hey, I see you.
I see you too.
Okay.
And where are you, Jordan?
I am in the big city of Mattoon, Illinois.
Ah, my hometown.
Yeah.
MATTOON. That's why we're all here. We're all Toonies.
Yes.
And that's Mattoon, not Mattoon.
Oh, no. You could
sleep on a butcher?
You can sniff an outsider, a mile away with that, the Mattoon stuff. Yeah.
When you try to Google it, you have to say Mattoon, or you get cartoons or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, Tom, are you where you need to be?
I'm where I need to be.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just start out here, Lisa. And I really appreciate you being with us. I got your name through Lottie, and that's little sis, right?
Correct. Yes.
And she had told me that, actually you need to be talking with Lisa because she knows more about this than I do.
Well, only because I'm a little older than her.
You've got her by a few?
A few.
Well, maybe tell us about things before, April of 1968. What was life like, for the Cox family?
Sure. Uncle Bill had 13 children, and Uncle Bill...
Not all.
Yes. And he loved every one of them, as well as all of his nieces and nephews. On that side of my family, there were actually 32 of us grandchildren. So his children plus the rest of us, there were a total of 32 of us. And we're a very close-knit family. We usually spent Thanksgivings and Christmases together, a whole family. So our grandparents' house was always full. And I remember as a kid, I loved to go to Uncle Bill's house and spend time with the kids, as well as Uncle Bill especially, and just they were just fun to be around, and they always had animals, and having that many people in a household, the house wasn't spotless, but it was loving, and I just really enjoyed being there. And I remember, and Charlotta may have told you that Teresa, who was killed, was Charlotta's age. Louie, who was killed, and his sister Louise were my age. And I do remember Teresa coming and spending nights at our house. And then particularly the Christmas before the kids were killed, we had Christmas at my house, so where I lived at that time. And I don't remember knowing him, Charles Fuller, at school, really. But, of course, afterwards, I realized he was in the same class that I was in. And he was at that Christmas get-together with all of the Cox family. Wow. I do remember he was very polite and nice, but very, very quiet. He was not a real outgoing person or real social, but nice and polite. And I think that may have been about the only time I was really around him and remember him. And so I have at least one Christmas picture from that Christmas that he was in. So.
Well, this would have been in the end of 1967.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ironically enough, I know where the house has been raised.
Yes, correct.
And so I used to actually have band practice where I have some friends that own the property now, and so there was a double corn crib.
Mm-hmm.
And they live just so if you take the Dole, off of DeWitt there, and you right before it kind of jogs around on the Kaskaskia, then you're right there on that property, right?
I don't remember exactly how to get there, but where my parents' home is, where I was raised and where Charlotta now lives, the Dole Road is right behind that. So we would just go down the side road by our house, turn right onto the Dole Road, and then just follow it till we got to Uncle Bill's. I don't really remember any landmarks or anything, but I just knew I just had to go straight on that road.
And no, it's beautiful out there. Right by the river. There's river bottoms, that kind of go where the Kaskaskia runs through. And so 13 kids. My gosh.
Yes.
Catholic family, right?
Yes. Uncle Bill and Aunt Lydia had both been married before, and so when they got married, Aunt Lydia had 2 children. Uncle Bill had 1. But then they had 10 together after that.
Right. And so, you kind of alluded to what they, like family get-togethers were like, and were they often out at Uncle Bill's or?
No, most often we met at my grandparents who lived in Mattoon on the east side of Mattoon. And as far back as I can remember, Grandma and Grandpa lived in a big old 2-story house. And that's just where we gathered. They lived in 2 different houses on Edgar Street, one right across the other, but they were both, I remember, 2-story. And the second one, I think, was, I don't know if it's bigger, but a little more open, but that's where we all gathered all the time.
Yeah.
To set the stage a little bit for what this time, 1967, 1968, about a month before this tragedy, was when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And then about a month after this tragedy was when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated.
Right. Lots of sad things going on then.
Yeah, there was a lot of sad things going on in the country, and gun violence of sorts. And I mean, I just even you saying that, how he was at the family Christmas get together, that was still, Martin Luther King had not been assassinated yet. So, there was such a tumultuous turning of events, like every day. The news, we think of today's media where there's probably more people turned off of the news than are engaged into it these days. But back then was when, everything was front page news. You had, everybody was getting a newspaper basically every day. Almost every household would wake up to a newspaper the front page would tell you, kind of set the mood for the day. And when I found that out, I think you were the one that told me that, Jordan, that, that link in the timeline that, and, one of the things when we were discussing whether to do this on the podcast or not was, we want to talk about Mattoon a lot, but we don't necessarily want to dwell on bad issues necessarily, or negativity. We want this to be a very positive, more of a healing experience. And we don't want a true crime episode necessarily out of it. But,
Sure.
Mattoon before this was very much, you probably didn't lock your doors. You knew your neighbors around, and all your neighbors kind of were watching. Well, they were your security systems. Like, everyone kind of knew everyone's story. It was a small enough town, but getting bigger, that might have been one of the heydays of Mattoon in the late 60s of sorts. So I'm sure that this came such a shock with everything else going on in the country that it really probably made people sadly change their ways. It was something that pushed in a change. I just think that's something we should talk about in the timeline wise. And that's why we're kind of setting the picture here for like what was, it like in the Cox family before
Right.
this tragedy. That's interesting though, that, he was at
I'm sorry. Everybody in the community was just, again, as you said, Lisa. Yeah, you guys had him at Christmas, and almost evil has at that point already got in through the front door, and kind of unsuspected.
It seemed like the really bad things that were going on, in addition to the things you mentioned, the Vietnam War was going on. So that, headlined the news virtually every day. But it all seemed so far away. It didn't really, unless you had a family member who, served or was serving in Vietnam, you didn't really feel that personal impact. And at the time the kids were killed, I don't remember ever hearing, or I've not done any research, but I don't even know if there had been any mass killings in the country before that. I'm sure there were, but, it was like this was a first.
I was trying to do, I did some research on this, and it again, like as Tom said, probably the day that a lot of people started locking their doors, not even in Mattoon, but just that the outreach or the reverberations around the murders reached all the way, across the country. Just no one had heard about such a thing.
We lived just outside of Mattoon, so you're probably familiar with the Lake Road. And so when you head west out of Mattoon onto Route 16 and you turn onto the Lake Road, we were just about a quarter mile down that road. So not a great distance, but yes, we never locked our doors, whether we were home or not. But there were only like 3 houses right there together, and we were in the middle, and we had a pole light on the side of the garage. The other houses didn't have any kind of lights on at night, unless they happened to leave a porch light on. And it seemed like people were always breaking down or having some kind of issues, either on the Lake Road or the side road that ran beside the house. And so our house was the house they always came to. Because the light was on, I guess it was inviting. But even when the kids were killed, the day that they were killed, and of course I wasn't home, neither were my parents at the time, but when I met with my dad and he told me what happened, I just went home by myself, and I don't even think I locked the door when I got home. I just didn't feel that need to lock myself in or lock other people out.
Interesting. Just waiting for you, Jordan.
I thought you had a question, Tom. We've talked with Tim enough to kind of set up our interview this evening. And rightfully so, I can only imagine being somewhat re-victimized every time, this parole hearing comes up. And he's kind of said that, well, there's a lot of people that have, done this story, but they didn't do it right. And this is our goal, is to make sure that you guys tell the story here, as we said. And so what do you think are some of the things that that were not done right as far as your story goes?
Of course, the family members are probably the closest to it and give you the most accurate information and the things that they were most impacted by. But I know that probably Louise, who was the most impacted because her twin was killed, certainly would be able to answer that question well. And Tim is a little bit younger than me. I don't remember how old Tim was, and the other kids were, much littler. Except they lost the youngest ones. But the things that I kind of remember were things that were said about the family that were not true or not accurate, or maybe had some truth to them, but that's not what people should have been focused on. And I remember some of the things was about Louise and saying that like she was going to leave with him, or other things about her relationship with Fuller, and things about Aunt Lydia and Uncle Bill, because they had so many children. And like I said, was their house immaculate? Was it clean? It was clean enough, I think, but it was filled with love, and you just felt that from Uncle Bill. And so I just think that I probably don't remember all of the issues that were raised and over the years have been pointed out, but those are the ones that I most remember that were either totally inaccurate or totally unfair.
And again,
taken out of context.
Yeah.
Yes.
And embellished, or anything, but at that point they're getting away from the story, and
yes.
So why do that? So I can only imagine again being re-victimized with somebody that comes along. Now there was a book done by Diane Sawyer, who not the journalist, but what I didn't realize was that in doing my research is she was friends with one of Fuller's sisters, and so it was skewed from the get-go, I felt. But and then there was also some articles written through the News Gazette about the murders by a Michael Clean, I believe, and he was the one that wrote the article about five little birds.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember this?
I kind of remember them, and I did read the book, The Mattu Murders, by Sawyer. It's been many years ago, and now you've piqued my curiosity, and it's like, I got to go back and read that again now.
Well, I just, in reading that she was actually friends with one of Fuller's daughter, it was almost told from his point of view. Right. Instead of your family's point of view, which was kind of like a little bit of a red flag. And truth be told, I've not read it. I plan on reading it, but hopefully in the course of these interviews with you all, then I can get my hands on a copy of that. But going back, Lisa, can you walk me just through the day that it happened?
Yeah, I can walk you through my day, of course. Yes. I was 16 at the time. I had been out of town all day. I'd gone on a class trip to Turkey Run, Indiana.
Oh, gee. That's a great class trip.
Yes. It was with one of the clubs that I belonged to through school. And when I got back into town, here's one of the advantages of living in a small town. My parents were hosting a dinner meeting at the Moose Club in Mattoon. And, so they had both of their vehicles there, and because we'd made prior arrangements, and the school bus took me to the Moose and dropped me off there so I could get my mom's car and go on home. And so it was evening time. If it wasn't dark yet, it was getting close to being dark. And I went into the Moose. And this was a dinner dance, like I said, that my parents hosted. My father was a survivor of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and he belonged to the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. And so they would have regular meetings throughout Illinois, especially central Illinois. And so this one happened to be in Mattoon. Anyway, I went in and found my dad, and he took me to the lobby and sat me down. He said, "I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to get upset." And the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, what did I do? It's like I didn't know what I did, but it's like, oh, what did I do? And then he told me what had happened to the children. And my mother had already left to go be with Uncle Bill. So there were 8 living children between Uncle Bill, my mom, and their siblings. And my mom seemed to be the one that family members came to in crisis. And she was a special lady, and all of my cousins, even today, think a lot about Aunt Pauline. But anyway, she had left to go be with Uncle Bill and Aunt Lydia and do what she could. And I just remember my dad telling me about it, and then I took his truck and I went on home. And I remember watching the news. Back at that time, the news then wasn't like it is now, and where they break into programs and stuff. So I don't remember seeing anything really particular. But like I said, I remember going there and being by myself and not being afraid. And I don't remember at that time if they knew yet that Charles Fuller had been the one that killed the children. And so if I knew that, maybe that's why I, wasn't scared, because I didn't see him as a threat. I know they hadn't actually picked him up yet, but anyway, I don't remember much more of that evening, except that I don't know if it was that evening or the next day, but then Aunt Lydia and Uncle Bill and all of the kids who were remaining at home came and stayed with us for a time during, the planning of the funerals and until they found another house for Uncle Bill, Aunt Lydia, and the kids to live in.
That's the one, of course, Charlotta had told us that, that some of the kids had come to live with you guys, afterwards. Now how many kids came to live with you?
Well, let's say if there were 13 and 3 of them were married, and that left 10, and 5 of them were murdered, then so five kids.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
So
and we just lived in a 3-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms.
Yeah, and that sounds like it might have been because your mother was such a caretaker, so she probably pushed it that way,
Yes, that, and my dad also was. He kind of came across as kind of a hard guy, but if there was ever anybody in need, he stepped up also.
And so your house got a whole lot bigger.
Yes, it did.
5 extra kids. Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
And then the other thing I just remembered is constant phone ringing of reporters and reporters being outside of the house and showing up.
Yeah, everyone's just baffled, and not baffled, but I'm just I mean, it's just polarizing. The whole thing is again, middle America, and not locking your doors, and then all of a sudden, I can't imagine what it was like for you guys. Was now during that day, Lisa, who was not there, and now that we've talked with Tim, he's kind of alluded to the fact that it turns out that this was probably premeditated.
Oh, yes, because he had written a manifesto. He had planned on killing the whole family, except Louise.
Wow.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, yeah. There was a diary he had been keeping for at least 6 months before the murders. So, I mean, that was part of the conviction, the way it looks, as far as it's definitely premeditated if you're writing it in your diary 6 months ahead of time, right, which that would have been before Christmas.
I was just going to say, so he had already been planning this before he spent Christmas with everybody.
He took that picture.
Yeah, and also, as you mentioned, there wasn't really mass killings or shootings at this point. I mean, I'm sure they had happened. I doubt this was like a first in America.
Sure.
But it wasn't part of the media culture that we get now as far as with mass shootings. So, to think that he thought this in his head, there wasn't something preemptive that was something he could copycat. Like, this literally came out of the mind of a 16-year-old boy,
Right.
It is a lot to delve into. And like you said, the culture then wasn't expecting anything like it. It wasn't, you didn't lock your doors. You didn't think, this wasn't the kind of behavior you expected in your neighborhood.
Right.
And maybe it was one of those things like Vietnam. It was far, far away, but it wasn't in Mattoon,
Right. Right. Not in my backyard.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Not in my backyard is exactly right. And now, before we talk with Tim this evening, he was not there, obviously.
At their house.
Yeah, who was not there at the house?
I don't really know. I know that. So Christine, who is the oldest, I don't believe she was there because, she was married. She was gone. Bobby, who's the next oldest, I don't believe he was there. And then Marie is the one who they talk about who was there, who was leaving to take one of the kids to the emergency room or the hospital.
Burned her blouse on the stove and took her to the hospital.
And then ended up giving Fuller a ride into town. So after, let's see, Christine, Bobby, Marie, and then I think Patty was the one that got hurt, that was going for medical care. And then there's, of course, Louise, who was Fuller's girlfriend. And then the 5 that were murdered. Let's see. There's Billy Colleen. I think Billy Colleen was home. So that's 11. So I'm missing 2 of them. But I think of the kids who were... so the oldest at home was Louie and Louise, the twins. And so I think all of the other kids who were that age and younger were at home, I believe.
Why do you think that if they were there, why do you think that there were some kids spared, or could he not coax them out? Because from what I've gathered, he took the boys out shooting.
He said he was out killing birds, is what he told Uncle Bill and Aunt Lydia when he came back to the house.
Yeah, and then he got the other two girls were said something about almost the same story, but a different story. He was going to go out and kill birds, and then he was going to go take them out to the barn to go shoot rats or shoot. Just what I've read. Does that kind of ring right with you?
I don't remember the rats. I guess because of the reference to the birds, it has always stuck with me that he had just been out killing birds, or referred to the kids as birds.
You know, I've struggled with this myself. It's it's the article that was done through the News Gazette was called "5 Little Birds," and that's what he had apparently gone back and said, "I've just killed 5 little birds." It's grabbing, the headline, and kind of look at it. I look at it from a couple different points of view as far as, little birds, like not that any little bird should be shot, let alone a human, right. But the fact that he equated them to just being birds too is not lost on me. It's just, but just the innocence in what he stole.
Because of the age of them, they were the youngest.
Yeah, they were. Oh my gosh. Wow. And so Fuller ends up he gets dropped off at 33rd and DeWitt.
Uh-huh.
And later gets to the train station where he confesses to one of his friends that he has killed them. And then it's he and his mother who ends up calling the police. Is that right? Is that your...
I don't remember that part. I just remember that he was walking down the street when the police picked him up.
Which was the 4th and Lincoln in Charleston.
Yes, in Charleston. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And at that point, I don't remember knowing how they identified him. I guess I thought or kind of assumed it was from talking through with the family and figuring out that it was him. I don't remember knowing anything about him and his mother.
Yeah.
From a children's perspective, like I can think of, when I was younger, and even when I was at my cousins' houses, which are all up in the Dakotas and Minnesota, the great wide north, if one of my cousins' boyfriends came up and was like, "Hey, you want to go out shooting and go out to the barn?" Oh yeah, I went immediately.
Yeah.
They were probably like, "Oh, this is going to be a good time. Like, we're going to have fun." And even in the maybe like, "Oh, maybe we're not supposed to because like mom and dad aren't home or whatever," but it would still be like, "Oh, but he's older. Like, this will be fine. We can do this. We're with an older. You respected." I won't say too much about it, but these days, I don't know if there's much reverence for age in the kid category, from 8 to 16. But when I was young, 8 to 16 or 5 to 16, like they were like, they were it. They had done it. They survived grade school. They had their driver's license. I mean, that was like
big time. Yeah, and he was pretty much the same age as Louis, who he killed. Louis was Louise's twin, and I don't think they had turned 16 yet, but they were pretty close to it. And then Fuller was 16, so I think 16.
I wonder, that's a good point, Tom, with especially Tom and I were in Boy Scouts together, so you always looked at the older kids, and he was one of my older kids. Yes, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm telling the story on you. Yeah. So I could see that, how easily it would be to do that. Had they ever done anything like that before? Had he ever taken them out shooting or anything?
Oh, I don't know. I just know that living out in the country and, having that old barn out there, I'm sure They'd been out back in that area exploring before, doing things kids do.
Exactly.
Before they lived in that house, they had lived just on down the road from us. Again, as you go down the lake road and you get to Lake Paradise, there's the cemetery there on the right. And if you turned left right there, the house is no longer there, but there was a house where Uncle Bill and Aunt Lydia and the kids lived then. And it was a pretty big yard and had one or two old barns on it, that property. And that's where I remember going to visit them and stay with them. And sure, we were always running around out there. It was out in the country. There was no traffic, doing things out in the old barns.
Yeah, that's what my point is. I don't think any of those children probably thought that they were on their way to their deaths.
Not in any danger at all.
Yeah, no. They didn't see danger at there at all. They just thought they were going to have a good time.
Yeah. Explore and have fun in the old barn.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. And so the going back to the premeditation, it's just kind of that shocked me. Hearing about how he had a journal and he planned on doing this. I wonder why, because his plan was to kill everybody.
Yes.
In his
except
journal.
Louise.
Well, of course, except for Louise, but Uncle Bill and Lydia, and I wonder why he didn't, or does that? I guess what I'm asking is, I wonder why maybe it could have been that very Christmas that you guys took a picture together, But for whatever reason, it was that night for whatever reason,
Yeah, I have no idea why he picked that particular day, or he just thought he had an opportunity. But my understanding is he basically got interrupted, with the commotion of Patty being burned and then, them having to take her to the emergency room. At least my understanding from the conversations that went on back then was he just got interrupted.
Well, it's a lot. Whenever you now you were in school with how old again were you, Lisa?
I just turned 16.
16.
And so Louie and Louise were just far enough behind me that they were a year behind me in school.
Yeah. What was the dynamics with school going past the murders? What was it like for them? Were they kind of, that's the family that, that the murders had happened to? Was there any sort of stigma around that,
I don't really remember a whole lot. Maybe I've just, blanked it out. But other than, I don't remember kids talking about it at school. I just remember more adults talking about it and hearing things my parents would say about things that particularly were said about Louise, and that maybe she was in on it or aware of it or, whatever. But, but I don't really remember school or there being, and maybe it was because we were just far enough different in age and different class levels that, because I don't even remember before the murders that our paths really crossed in school. And even though it was a, fairly small school, I know this isn't huge in today's numbers, but my class had over 400 people in it when we graduated. So it wasn't like it was a small school. But I think
my class had 314 when we graduated Mattoon.
Oh, really? What? I won't ask what year.
It was 94. So.
Okay. And I graduated in 69. So, and, maybe just the things we were interested in were different. I don't know that Louie and Louise were involved in many extracurricular activities at school, and I was, different organizations and clubs and some athletic things that I think maybe we just kind of ran in different circles at that point in our lives.
That would be terrible for Louise to, maybe be accused of that.
Yes.
How has she been? I can only imagine. It's just something that can be, just in my experience with death and with families. I mean, I'm sure that she can go right back there in a minute, which is, could be traumatizing or re-traumatizing, over the years.
Right. I haven't really spent much time with Louise in many years because right after graduation, I left Mattoon and pretty much have been gone since then. But I know at the time, she was devastated. She lost 5 of her siblings. It was her boyfriend that did it. It was because of her. Not that she encouraged that or, was even cognizant of it, but, the facts came out. He did it because of her. That at that time, I know certainly she was devastated and had all the kinds of feelings you have that go along with that. But, she ultimately got married and had 2 kids, and I know she lives in Arkansas now. And so we were kind of connected on Facebook, but you know how those algorithms work, and you kind of lose people over time. So I haven't even really seen any posts from her in quite a while now. She does. Patty, the one that got burned that day. I live in Texas now, and Patty lives in Texas, and she has conversation with Charlotta once in a while. So I think it's been almost 2 years ago. Charlotta, Patty, and I did get together for lunch.
Oh, good.
And Tim. But he was a truck driver or whatever. So I virtually lost contact with Tim. Now, Christine, the oldest, Charlotta and I both still have a lot of contact with. And then, Bobby moved to Arkansas. Louise moved to Arkansas. So I kind of know where they're at, but just haven't had real contact with any of them.
Well, going back to Louise, I have a feeling that if, of course, she's been accused, but Charles Fuller never wrote anything about that in his premeditation. He never said anything about this is our plan and this is what's going to happen. No, and I think he would have if it's like, we're going to, run off together and this. And so I can only imagine, it's she's probably had the roughest of because of the impetus behind his sick mind to do this. And so we're going to talk with Tim a little bit later. Would Christine, do you think that she would be someone else to talk to, or would she?
She didn't live at home at the time. I don't know that she really knew Charles Fuller. So I don't know. I've never really talked to Christine about it. Christine is kind of like a sister because when Uncle Bill was divorced and I think he lived in Kansas at the time. When he moved back to the Mattoon area, I wasn't born yet, and my parents took Christine in and raised her for about 5 years until Uncle Bill married Aunt Lydia. So off and on, she would come and stay with us over the years. So she's kind of like a half sister to me, but she's also older. and sometimes forgetful.
Yeah. Now Uncle Bill wrote his book, which was called Awake.
I don't remember that book. I'll have to look for that one too.
Yeah, so that's again, as we go through this is going to be several series, several episode. It's just too much to go through in one podcast. So that's I'm trying to get my hands on that, and then as well as the Cox family scrapbook that is that. I think it was Charlotta was telling me about that exists somewhere, about all the news clippings, everything about the murders that somebody has. So
yeah, again, our mother, she collected everything and made that scrapbook, and so Charlotta told me she was getting that for you.
Yeah, that's I just can't imagine, again, it must still seem, kind of raw whenever you talk about the murders, and just, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just going back to think about things, and, the shock of it,
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I thank you for being with us. Is it okay if we check back with you?
Sure.
So we're going to do, I think that Tom and I have talked about doing, this will probably be about 4 episodes long, 4 being kind of be a catch-all. From what I found out just in, doing this thus far, there's been people that have a story, even if they weren't directly involved, then they have a story, like the gentleman that we're going to talk to, that Fuller tried to sell the gun to shortly afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk with him, as well as some other people that have some insight. But if it's okay, we appreciate you being here, and I think we'll check back in with you once we get a little further into this.
Okay. I'm sure there's a lot of things I don't remember, but there's a lot of things that I do. So.
Well, yeah, sounds good. And as we go through this, maybe, I'm sure a lot of people will kind of remember, I remember this. I remember where I was that day. And so we'll check back in with you. And I appreciate you so much. I know it's not easy, but I really appreciate you being with us and actually getting the story right and told by your family instead of everybody telling it.
I appreciate the perspective that you're taking, and that you want to get it right, and that you are not just trying to condense it down into one small segment, that there was a lot going on.
There was. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Right, we'll check back in with you. Okay, Lisa? Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye now. Okay. Our thanks to Lisa in sharing her story. Now we're going to get to our second part of our interview with Tim Cox.
Pauline is my aunt. And that night, we all went to my Aunt Pauline's house and stayed there for a few days, several days actually, until everything kind of calmed down. The funerals were over, and it gave my mom and dad a chance to find a house in town to move into.
After the murders had happened, that there were some of the kids. Did you go and live with, or were you still back with mom and dad?
I was with mom and dad at my aunt's for a while. Then I went to my best friend Greg. Went to his house in Cook's Mill to finish out the school year at Humboldt. And I stayed out there till the school year was up.
And you guys had Dorrance roots and some Humboldt roots.
Ninth grade I went to Humboldt.
That's probably where well, Tom, your second mom is
Gail. Yeah.
Yeah, Gail
Hines.
Yeah, yes. And she and I went to school together in ninth grade. And from there on through high school.
Yeah.
So after the murders had happened and they ended up grabbing Fuller, what was that process, going forward with how fast or slow did that take for the judicial, part of the aspect to transpire?
Well, they called him the next day after what he'd done, and it happened the 27th of April, which is 58 years this coming Monday.
Yeah.
And that whole summer, they had him go through psychological evaluations, and they did the sodium pentothal thing and all that. And then they finally started having the hearings and all that kind of thing. And I believe it was that following October when they finally sentenced him.
Wow, that's pretty fast compared to today's court standards on time.
Yeah, compared to today, yes.
Yeah.
And so, since the aftermath, Tim, he has been up on parole several years. I saw that there was a certain time frame where they actually said, "Oh, okay, you're not going to be eligible until we're going to do this on it was like a 5-year kind of."
We got a 5-year stay on his parole hearings, I think twice now, either 2 or 3 times at the most. But other than that, it's been every year we had to fight his parole. And for the first
year?
Yes. For the first 8 to 10 years, we didn't even know he came up for parole, and they had hearings without our knowledge of it.
Oh, geez. Wow. That's amazing. That's unbelievable. And so, again, having to go and relive it, this is something that you've had to bear, and just he is up again. Apparently, this is why the case kind of came back into our vantage point. And I said, you know what? Let's talk with the Cox family and get their story on this. And he's apparently up again.
Yes, sir. He comes up for parole on July 18th of this year at 9 o'clock. And anybody that wants to write a letter to the parole board, we would greatly appreciate any letters written to try to keep him in there.
Now he's at Graham, right?
Yes, Graham Correctional Center in Hillsborough, Illinois.
And where would we, if we could have people, if they felt so inclined to do so, where would we have those letters sent?
Okay, hang on just a second. I can give you that information. I've got the old letter here. Of course, you write to the Prisoner Review Board, and in any letter you send, they have to include his prisoner number, which is C10244. So you put RE C10244, Thomas Fuller. Then the IND dot numbers, S 684-289 290 291 292 and 293. Crime, murders, 5 counts, 70 to 99 years.
No.
Then 3 in parentheses 3CC and another set of parentheses 2CS parentheses. Sent date 12/10/68.
12/10/68. And I think people would be interested to know that. And thank you so much for giving us that information.
And that goes to the Prisoner Review Board, 1001 North Walnut Street, Springfield, Illinois, 62702.
Okay, and we'll be happy to post that as well. Back to Charles again. Like with his family, he had moved to town, and I think fairly, recently before all of this. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't know the exact time they moved to Mattoon, but it was shortly before school started of that year, 67, the fall of 67. And his mom, his 2 sisters, and his little brother, that was 5 years old, and himself moved there from Texas. And his mom and dad were going through a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And his mom and sisters moved there.
Is his father an optometrist, or is that something?
His father was an optometrist in Bryan, College Station, Texas. Bryan, Texas, College Station, Texas. They're a twin city.
Oh, okay. And we talked about the premeditation on this. I don't ever get the inkling that his family had any idea about any of this, but it sounds like he was set out to kill people no matter what.
Yeah, like I said, he had in that journal that he wanted to know what it was like to kill somebody ever since he was 5 years old.
So it was going to be somebody in his mind. Yeah. Oh.
And to this day, he takes no responsibility for what he's done. In fact, at one time he wrote a 37-page letter saying how it was everybody else's fault but his.
Yeah, he's never taken accountability. I've read some of the parole board transcripts, and he won't take ownership.
And that's who else pulled the trigger? It's like, I don't know how.
Well, he says he did it, but it's everybody else's fault.
Yeah. And what's his? Without me, going back into the transcripts here, he, what are some of his claims about that?
Well, he's talking about how my parents were such bad parents, saying my mom was lazy and everything, and saying my dad was nothing but a drunk and wouldn't work and all this kind of stuff, which is totally untrue. My dad may not have been highly educated and all that kind of thing, but my dad was a hard-working person, and he was an honest person. And my mom and dad gave us what we really needed. No, not financially. We didn't have a lot of money and have a lot of real nice things and all that, but they gave us the love that we all needed.
Yeah, and Carlissa echoed that too, where she said she always enjoyed your father and always enjoyed coming over to the house, and that it was a house full of love. Is the way she described it.
Yeah, my dad and mom loved us kids as much, if not more, than most parents.
And Dad wrote his own book about everything, and that book's called Awake.
Well, Awake is a deal that the Jehovah's Witnesses put out. He wrote an article and put it in the Awake.
Okay. So it wasn't a book, but it was an article through. He joined the Jehovah's Witness.
Yes, shortly before all this happened, they approached my dad, and Dad said he didn't want anything to do with it. Well, then, shortly after the kids were killed, they approached him again, and he was in a very vulnerable state, and he got in with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and that, I think, helped my dad survive mentally and emotionally over the years.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah, I can too. And what was Mom and Dad's relationship like after things?
Well, of course, they hurt a lot.
Well, yeah. Imagine.
They struggled with it. And my mother, when she passed away, she was just wore out from everything, and she had just given up.
Yeah. Mm.
And it always, tore at him and everything else. What happened.
Yeah, all the what ifs. Like, what if I would have stayed? She probably had a little bit of feeling that if she wouldn't have had to have taken your one sister to the hospital, that she would have been around to help protect the kids.
Well, I think all of us.
Or she would have been another victim.
All of us, to a certain extent, had those thoughts of,
sure, could have.
What if we didn't? What if we could have seen what was going on? Could we have seen, or why didn't we see that this was going to happen?
Yeah.
And I personally, myself, blamed myself for years.
Mm-hmm.
I was with him that morning, walking the river. He had that gun with him. Why did he not kill me?
Yeah.
And why did I not see what was going on? Why did he do this? Why didn't I see it ahead of time?
I think that's anybody that could look from the outside in. There's survivor's guilt with just in my tenure at the funeral home, and seeing in people that would survive things why not me? Why them? Why? What if? The coulda, shoulda, wouldas they'll get you to your core.
I know Louise has struggled with this forever, because she's the one that brought him to the house.
Yeah.
But it's not her fault. She had nothing to do with this. It just happened to be that this person decided to do what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And the only one to blame is him. And the only thing that still is getting me through this is I used to belong to the church up at Danville, and the preacher that we had there, I spoke with him, and we talked about this situation, what happened, and my guilt, how I felt, why didn't I see this? Why didn't he kill me and all this? He said, you know what? The only one that is to blame is the person that pulled the trigger.
Yep.
Yeah. 100%.
You can't blame the gun. You can't blame anybody else. Only the person that chose to pull the trigger.
Yeah. No. My gosh. Okay, Tim, I think we're going to, as I told Carlissa, we're going to come back with you because this is just too much for a one episode. It's going to have to be at least 3 or 4 episodes before we get everything in its entirety. Would it be okay to call you back and with maybe some additional questions, things like that?
Of course. Like I said, my main thing I'm wanting to get with you guys is I want people to know the truth about things and the fact that my parents were not the people that he made them out to be, not the people that these other journalists wrote in their articles.
Yeah.
Yes, we were poor. Yes, Mom and Dad didn't have a college education and all that, but they gave us what we needed. And my dad was not an alcoholic. He was not lazy, and neither was my mother.
I'm so sorry that you've been through this, and again, re-victimized year after year. I didn't realize that you guys had to go through this every single year with the parole things, the parole hearings. And so I'm glad that you've given us the information for people that would like to reach out. And I know that you've got still a community behind you here.
And that's very much appreciated. I think the public needs to voice the fact that we want to get another 5-year stay or longer, if at all possible. We don't want to have to go through this again in another year and all that kind of thing. And until this person is dead and gone, the least we have to deal with it, the better off we'll be.
I agree. Yep. I mean, there's so many parts of the justice system that don't seem too just, but something like this for not just your family, but so many victim families to constantly have to relive and open up. I'm sure there are some wrongfully convicted people out there, but I think there's some pretty obvious ones that aren't, like this.
Exactly, and yes, there are some people get mixed up in things and end up getting blamed for something they didn't do.
Yeah, this seems like a really clear-cut case, because I came out of nowhere with my knowledge in it. A few months ago I had virtually zero knowledge of it, and then in the last couple of weeks I've been digging into it, and it's very cut and dry how most of the facts are stated with it. There's not anything when I've also been a private investigator in part of my life, so I do have a bit of an investigator mind. And it's pretty, everything lines up. And like you said, it was pretty open shut case for the tragedy to happen, and for him to be convicted that same year is, these days that's unheard of in law enforcement. So I mean, I think they had their ducks in a row, and they know they got the right guy. So let's hope they keep him there.
Well, we can only hope and pray, but the more people voice their opinion on it, that they don't want him out, maybe they'll continue to keep him in there.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not even ambiguous at all. It seems very cut and dry as far as the case goes. I baffled that he. Oh, I don't know. Some of the greatest injustices happen in the justice system. As far as that goes, and him, able to be actually get a hearing, every year after that, and then you guys not knowing, it's just it's not good. But I have faith that with the community that's behind you on this, that I'm hoping that people, if they feel so inclined to write the parole board, and again, yeah, I'm at a loss for words, Tim. Actually, I don't know what to say other than I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
The thing of it is, a lot of people, feel the way you do, and they express their sorrow and all that kind of thing. And the best thing we can do is just fight to keep him in there.
Yeah, put pen to paper.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Pen to paper and voice. And get the voice opinion out there,
We're so glad we got your voice. We got your voice today to talk to us. I'm so grateful. And again, if there's any other family members that you have that would also want to talk to us, then we want to err on the side of inclusion. And
I did talk to my sister Louise, and I did talk to her husband. And Louise, of course, doesn't want to talk, and she's just too emotional.
Yeah.
And Bill wants to, but right now, with Louise in the hospital, she just had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with that and trying to get her stable enough to go home and all that kind of thing. So,
well, if there's anything that even she wants to share through you, or just after we get done talking, if you want to let her know, this isn't.
I did tell them that we were.
Go ahead.
We were going to be speaking today, and I told them that we discussed it and everything. And our main thing, and this is Louise and myself and the rest of the family, our thing is to get the truth out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Clear our parents' names and her name.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, again, anyone that, even if they're a family member that again doesn't want to necessarily be on the line with Tom and I, but anything that they could email or write, or with your anyone you could reach out to that would like to be part of this, then we're going to include that in your story.
And we appreciate that.
Well, that was pretty heavy, hearing the whole story from Tim. I think we still have a couple more questions, and we'll need another episode to really kind of wrap up the thoughts on that. So if anyone wants to chime in, I know we still have a person who was at Top Boy and spoke with Charles after the incident and tried to sell him a gun. And then I think we have a couple other people lined up.
We've still got some Cox family members that would like to be part of this, and
perfect.
We're going to be talking with them. And again, anyone else that has any story to tell that is pertinent to the Cox family story, please reach out to Tom or I on Facebook or via email, and we'll see if we can get everyone there. We like to err on the side of inclusion and make sure that we have told the story in its entirety.
Agreed.
Yeah. So this has been very heavy, and I know the whole community has rallied behind the Cox family. And now that we know where to go as far as showing your support and signing the petition, and making sure that the vote isn't as close as it was last time, please do so. And we'll be talking with you in episode 3. And next week, the Cox family is going to be sharing their family scrapbook with me, with all the articles and some pictures that we hope to upload for episode 3. So stay tuned.